All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is defining roles and responsibilities. What that means is job descriptions. And what's a job description? A job description is a written document, underline written, that clearly identifies and spells out all the relevant aspects of a specific position. They do not describe the people who may currently hold those positions. It's really easy to decide that the job description of inventory clerk is whatever Bob the inventory clerk happens to be in terms of skill level and number of years of experience and education and those kinds of things. That is not a job description. A job description spells out what are the duties and what are the results. We'll get to all the details on this. Job descriptions are dynamic documents that are updated as responsibilities and expected results and performance standards change. They're not set and forget. Because they include performance targets and standards, they're not intended to limit employees. They're actually intended to help employees stretch what they do and get bigger and better and expand their ability to perform beyond those standards and therefore their ability to contribute within the organization. And if they're able to exceed what's going on in their job standards, they're obviously going to become somebody who is a candidate for moving up in the organization. Why do you want job descriptions? What do? They ensure that all functions and activities in your company, all the things that need to happen, are in fact on somebody's plate. They clarify reporting relationships. The job descriptions provide a basis for hiring and promotion. They communicate the expectations. They minimize confusion and conflict about who does what. If it's on your job description, it's what you do. And they provide a basis for employee performance evaluations. How do you create a job description? First step, we develop a job description template. Second, we create priorities. Which job descriptions should be created first and second and third. Group one this is pretty commonsensical. Group one is you look at positions that currently exist. Group two is planned hires in the next 3 to 12 months. And group three would be planned hires beyond 12 months. You decide who's accountable for doing the writing and creating. First couple, probably you, until you get comfortable with what it all means, and then you can document your process and think about handing it off and delegating the process of writing job descriptions to somebody else. And then finally, you introduce them to the person whose job description it is. Here's a sample. Job description, the company's name is going to be Joe's Plumbing. The job title, Plumbing Dispatcher. Now we know whose name is in that box, or we might remember from a few slides back, or in the prior section, who is the plumbing dispatcher, but we don't care right now. All we care about is the function and the job itself. Who does he report to or she report to? It reports to the general manager. Who reports to this position? The 4 installers. Okay, first of all, we're going to do a job result summary. What is it you want this position to accomplish? Over here we say it's a statement that focuses on the result that the position is supposed to accomplish. Simply, why is the job there? What's it supposed to do? Focus on the result, and ideally it's just one sentence. In our case, pretty simple: to maximize customer satisfaction and profitability and achieve or exceed planned targets. Next on the list, key responsibilities. Consist of 1 to 10. You get up there more than that, you're kind of thinking that might be too many for a particular position, and it may need to be broken into other things, unless those responsibilities are each very minor in terms of time and in terms of the amount of time and effort that's required to do them. These things need to be kept, as we say here, short and sweet. So what's the dispatcher's responsibilities? Schedule the service techs. He happens to have the job of reconciling the work orders and the billings. He has to be the one to maintain trucks and the parts inventories in those trucks. And he's the one who's tracking performance to the weekly, monthly, and annual plan targets. Okay, the performance indicators. Some characteristics of performance indicators. They have to be in line with the position's job results. Well, that makes sense. If you think that profitability is part of the job that needs to be done here, then profitability needs to be a measure of success. Performance indicators need to be under the control of the subject position. That means if you're the operations guy, you shouldn't be responsible for getting sales. Performance indicators ought to be synchronized with the desired results and performance criteria of the other positions in the company. Well, what does that mean? It means you can put people at odds with each other if performance indicators aren't coordinated. If you have a salesperson whose performance indicator is pure revenue, but you've got a general manager whose performance indicator is profitability, well, the sales guy can make lots more sales if he cuts the price, but it's going to kill the profitability. And therefore, those two performance standards are going to be in complete opposition, and there's going to be unhappy people. Fourth, we want the performance indicators to be synchronized with the desired results for the company. If your big deal is wanting to grow, then minimizing expenses may not be the thing that you want people to do. You may want people to be spending and doing investment spending to do whatever they can to get the revenue number up. So synchronizing what you're asking your people to do with what your long-term goals with the company are, important thing. Performance indicators are also adjustable as the business or the position changes. Maybe you want to change from really going after revenue, and now you want to focus on profitability. Well, now you want to turn the performance indicator around towards minimizing expenses and maximizing profitability. Okay, I put two of them on here in one slide. This one has standards as well. So the performance indicators here, we're going to say that one of them that we think is pretty important is the average call to arrival time for a customer. How long does it take between the time a customer calls and the time we're able to show up on site? We're establishing a standard of 90 minutes, no more than 90 minutes. Second performance indicator is how much profit are we generating per service call? And we're going to set the standard as $175. Well, that's nice on a per call basis, but if you only do 2 calls a day versus 5, you're not really going to put enough money in the bank to hit any kind of profit target. So we have to extend that a little bit to have a volume number as well. So we've included total profit for the year, or for the week, the month, and the year, and we establish weekly, monthly, and annual targets. And here are those things. What are the indicators? What are the standards for each indicator? They have to be measurable and specific. This is really important. They have to be measurable. If they're not measurable, then when you do performance appraisals, it's really hard to determine whether somebody did a good job, a great job, or a lousy job, and it's open to opinion. If a person understands what they're responsible for and what the standards specifically are for that position, that section of a performance appraisal is almost a no-brainer, because everybody knows he and you, or she and you, knows exactly how they've done over that period. Those standards ought to be challenging but achievable. Next thing, qualifications. Needs to be as specific as possible. In our case here, we're saying that even though this is a dispatcher's position and isn't really out in the field, we want the dispatcher to still have a current plumbing contractor's license. We want him to have a working knowledge of Excel and Word. We want him to have at least 3 years of scheduling experience. The thing that makes these things important is that they're going to define the basis for an ideal candidate when you go out and hire. Now, we've already got somebody in this position, but remember, Bob's going to be moving up sometime in the future to that ops manager's job, and we're going to have to replace him as dispatcher. And to do that, we have to have a very clear definition of what it is we're looking for in a candidate. And in these qualifications, that's where we do it. And the more detailed, the better. Okay, finally, the pay range. In this case, we say it's between $20 and $30 an hour. So why do we set a range? Well, first of all, you may have people who come in, obviously, with lighter qualifications than others. You don't want to start them at the top of the salary, so you're going to start them out lower. But here's a more important thing, and it's a place where you can really get trapped. If you have an employee who's been around for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, and they started off at $10 an hour or $12 an hour, and year after year they've been getting 3% or 5% raises. Well, year after year after year after years, those compound into a really big number, and they've turned into a number that becomes unaffordable for you. And so there's this awkward, unpleasant situation of saying, gosh, you know, I love you, you've been around for a really long time, you're like family, but I can't afford you anymore. Because remember, an employee is a leveraged investment. If you're not getting more than a satisfactory return on the investment that you're making in that employee, that expense has to be reduced one way or another, and most of the options aren't all that pleasant. So by setting a range and saying, if you're in this job, this is the most that you're going to make. If you hit the top of the range, you're going to stay there, and there's not going to be any more, quote, merit increases or any more inflation increases or anything like that. It's just what you're going to make. Doesn't mean you can't make more money. It means that if you want more money, you need to look around on the org chart, look at the job descriptions and see where the money's better, and see if you can't work yourself into a higher level position that pays more. Okay, you introduce the position contract or the job description to the employee. Now, you can have them involved in the creation of it. That's perfectly okay, because the fact is they probably, in some cases, know the position as well or better than you do. But once it's done, and once you've set things like the performance standards and the salary ranges and the qualifications, that's really not open to negotiation. You're the boss and you can set them. They can't be outrageous and unreasonable, but they can be challenging. It doesn't mean that every employee is going to rebel against it, nor does it mean that every employee is going to be thrilled with it, because this creates a level of structure that some people just aren't comfortable with. We talked about updating job descriptions on a regular basis. Probably need to take a look at them maybe every year, because if they drift away from the reality of the job, they become less and less useful. Mentioned earlier that this document is also going to be used in the hiring process to ensure that new people understand and agree to the job that they're taking. If they've got it all lined out as to here are the responsibilities, here are the results that we expect you to create, and here's the standards for those results, you can put that in front of a candidate that you're ready to hire and say, here it is, this is the deal, I'm being upfront about it, are you good with it? So there's no gotchas later for either one of you, no surprises. Monitoring the job description, I mentioned, need to be looked at once in a while. Regularly check them to make sure that everything is still aligned with the job. If they drift away from the reality, then they lose relevance. People will say, oh gosh, in my performance appraisal, will you tell me that I'm 20% under what I'm supposed to be? Well, my job changed, remember, back in June or July? And you didn't change the standard, even though my situation changed so that it wasn't possible for me to get that same standard. They need to be lined up to prevent that kind of thing from happening. They also need to be lined up because if you change the qualifications and the pay rates or anything like this, it's important that when you go hiring, that job description is detailing those kinds of things in an up-to-date way so that you're hiring people for today's job, not for a job description you wrote 3 years ago. Everything is subject to revision, and ideally the performance standards can be jacked up over time. People start getting better at their job, they start achieving 110%, 120%. Nothing wrong with jacking up the standard, and there's also nothing wrong with increasing their pay to compensate them for really good performance. Okay, that's what we have for job descriptions, roles and responsibilities. And next, now that we've defined what it is we want to hire, we're going to go on to actually getting somebody in the house.